Hey everyone, welcome to the EarthRise podcast. This is Derek Barris, episode 90. I hope you enjoyed my last conversation with Dax Devlon Ross. Sorry about the audio, we're having some Zoom issues, but that hopefully is resolved moving forward. Quick notes, episode 91 will be my talk with Robert Whitaker. He is the author of Anatomy of an Epidemic, very influential book on my work. Read it about a decade ago when it first came out, and then reread it recently as I'm working on Hero's Dose, my book on psychedelics and mental health. We'll be talking about the history of mental health and treatments for mental health in the 19th and 20th and now 21st centuries, and also the dangers of antidepressants over long-term usage. He's really been leading the charge on that, and that's something that I think is essential to talk about. I think in a few years we'll recognize what's happening with SNRIs and SSRIs and antipsychotics to be almost as damaging as the opioid epidemic. That we'll be recording on Friday. Episode 92, I will be talking to R.P. Eddy, who is the co-author with Richard Clark of Warnings, Finding Cassandras to Stop Catastrophes. Interesting about this book is 2 weeks ago, I just finished reading a book on the opioid epidemic, actually, and I was going to reread Warnings. It's from 2017 for the chapter on pandemics, because the book is all about instances where people warned us that there were problems and we didn't listen, and the fallout that happened from that. And so he used 7 case examples of what has happened, and then he was looking in the future, and pandemics is a chapter on that. And the day that I was going to begin rereading it, he randomly reached out to me on Twitter, sending me that chapter because he had seen my work on Big Think. So it was just a nice coincidence, and we've had some good talk on Twitter. I'll be talking to him next Wednesday. Lastly, the Conspirituality podcast, which grew out of my 2 conversations on this podcast with Matthew Remski and Julian Walker, is now its own thing. We're recording episode 3 tomorrow. Check out conspirituality.net. I'm really enjoying those conversations. Today, I want to briefly talk about something kind of rolling off of my talk with Dax in the last episode, which is implicit bias. And that is the understanding that we all are tribal animals and we all have biases that extend outward. And the importance is to recognize those biases and to make the implicit bias explicit, not meaning to go out and play it out, but to understand it, is really relevant. And we've reached that point in this culture. Just before I hit record, I was reading an article that NASCAR has decided to not use the Confederate flag any longer on any of the cars. It's making it illegal in terms of their races. And while I don't really have any investment with NASCAR or racing in general, those symbolic gestures matter. They don't matter as much as legislation and real reform, but the fact that they stepped up and did that, there's something to be said for that, with these, also with the statues coming down around the country. And that implicit bias, it's in all of us, and recognizing it and then trying to move forward and overcome it is the challenge of our era. It always has been, but now we're really face to face with it. Now, with conspirituality, this topic would probably be appropriate for there because someone sent me an email newsletter that someone posted, and I'm actually connected with this yoga instructor on Facebook. I don't know her in person. I have a lot of connections from my various work, but I don't really ring a bell, but I've seen her posts around, and she published something called We Are Being Played, Please Read. I can't even get into all of it. It's what we talk about on Conspirituality, the 5G vaccine, Gates, Soros, Fauci, that the whole clusterfuck there of just confusing ideology. I would really recommend that you look into Occam's razor to better understand a little bit about reality, but it's a very convoluted post. But there's one paragraph that jumped out at me, and it was I can't even say special. I can't be in any capacity sarcastic about it because it's just really sad. But this intersection between where the wellness and yoga community has gone and how far it's spilled over into right-wing conspiracy theories, this right here is indicative of it. It's actually an ideal paragraph to point it out, and that's why I'm talking about it. So it was, as always, it starts off with very honest and truthful challenges that we face. We have a corrupt government that is doing things that is going to be very damaging to our democracy in the long term. That is true, and we have to be prepared to face that as it comes. But this paragraph is about addressing the riots that are happening right now. Now the riots. There seem to be... Sorry. That would be Magellan, who I think wants to leave the room. Excuse me. For those of you not on watching on video, that's what happens when you keep a cat in the room when you're recording. Now the riots. There seem to be as many incongruences with the black man who was murdered. Say his name. Seriously, say his name. George Floyd. There seem to be as many incongruences with the black man who was murdered. Was he really who he said he was? Did he actually die? Was that man really a cop? Did they really work together? Why was his casket closed? Why was there even a big funeral allowed with politicians and celebrities when people all around the world are being denied funerals right now? Why were protests suddenly allowed to happen when a week earlier we were told not to go outside? Why were there riots? Why were there two groups? Where did the rioters come from? Why were bricks planted everywhere? So many things being said about the situation of what is true and what is not true. Here's what is true. Have some fucking compassion. Be a human being. My God, how have we gotten to this space with people who are labeling themselves as gracious living lifestyle, as compassionate people who are trying to bring light into the world? And this is how we're acting? Come on. Seriously, that family, that is a father of 5 children. And you know what? If you want to toe the Candace Owens line of talking about his past as if that matters, why a man stood on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, like that has anything to do with it. I was thinking, because in the Conspirituality podcast about Charles Eisenstein, I'm taking this course right now in science writing at Stanford, and I've read many years for Big Think. I read a lot of research papers. And in academia and in science, the writing style is that the opening section, you make your argument. It's like, here's your argument, and then you spend the rest of the paper explaining your points. You're defending your argument. That's a popular style. It works well in nonfiction. It doesn't always work in fiction, but sometimes it does. Sometimes the very first sentence you find out that the main character is dead. And then you spend the rest of the book finding out why that is, but there's a reveal in the beginning. But some of the best works of fiction you don't find out till the very end. Pincher Martin by William Golding is a great example. I won't give it away if you haven't read it, but you don't find out what the whole story is going on until the very last chapter. And that's a great style. Here's where it gets confusing. And it's not specific to this article, but this is also doing kind of the same thing. Eisenstein does this specifically. And I've noticed a lot of people in this space right now that is merging these wellness healers with this conspiracy thinking are doing. They're making an argument that they want to seem scientific, yet they're not laying out the agenda until the very end of their article, essay, whatever it has, if they even lay it out. Like with the coronation, I don't know what he's saying. And that's a problem, because there should be a clear line of thought. Now, if you've watched his video with Sayerji, which we talk about on Conspirituality, he says he's just asking questions, and that's where the rhetorical style is very similar to what's going on right here. The questions you ask point to your agenda, In this case, it points to an implicit bias, which is a white person who on her feed is getting all this support. And I've looked through and I've only seen white people supporting this, whatever it is, and not really making any sort of point, but presenting ideas as if they mattered. Like, for example, was that man really a cop? Yeah, he was. You can find articles from his misbehavior as a cop from 2005, 2006, 2007. He's had numerous run-ins before. Was he really who he said he was, George Floyd? Yeah, he was. Yeah, this is all in the public record. There's no conspiracy here. This is what the country was built on. Now, this style of asking questions but not ever even trying to come to conclusions, it actually, first of all, it's only feeding the paranoia. I don't understand the point except this circular thinking that's happening. But what it does show, and what is really problematic at this point, is that recognition of implicit bias and of privilege. This is it right here. This is the security officer in New Jersey over the weekend who was kneeling on someone's neck as the protesters walked by, who was put on probation or fired, and one of the people were fired. This is I can't see beyond my own world. So instead of trying to look, I'm just going to fall back on what's comfortable in me and share my confusion out loud. I'm going to let inside voice come out right now. That's what's happening. And I wonder why the people who frame themselves as being in or leaders in this wellness, holistic space are so sick. And you know what? That's okay. We all have our stuff. There are many things that every one of us, myself included, don't know about, and that's okay. But processing in this manner, this is a big part of the problem that people are trying to address right now. That inability to see over your own stuff, so you just get mired in it. I think about Al Sharpton talking directly to the daughters of George Floyd, and then hearing some of the daughters, or one of them at least, speak at the funeral, and what they're going through right now. And if you've taken it upon yourself to say that as an occupation, as a passion, whatever it is to help fix other people, you have to know you have to start with yourself. And you also have to know that your place in this whole scheme is very small. And that's okay, because that's true for all of us. There's a saying that's been going around recently, is that you never rise to the occasion, you only fall back on your training. And what I'm seeing right now is a lot of people who haven't been training. They haven't been training well, at least. And whether it's because they haven't been exposed to these issues before, whether they haven't experienced pain or suffering outside of their own limited physical body, physical by meaning themselves, not anything metaphysical. If they haven't come to grips with what America is as a society yet, I don't know where the healing starts. I don't know your role in it. Because what we're going through right now with these protests, this is centuries in the making. And I'm for one, as frightening as a time as it is, and yeah, it's during a pandemic, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be going through this pain, because what are you going to do? Just pretend it's not there? I'll close with this. This week's John Oliver episode was fantastic, as always, but this week was extra. And there's one moment that really hit me hard when he compares what was happening in Black America and the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and the bridge and Attica and everything that was happening around the time of 1967, and then showing the Summer of Love and the big gatherings of predominantly white people saying everything was okay. Because that's what we're doing right now. This is parallel. When you have people living on the beaches in Bali or Costa Rica or Nicaragua or wherever, in Los Angeles, wherever this community that I keep referring to as the wellness community happen to be, they have not been exposed. I don't know where they've been, but they've been checked out of the reality of what's been happening in America since they were born, since long before any of us were born. And if we're going to really heal, if that whole idea of we're not free until all beings are free is something that you actually believe in, well, we have an opportunity right now to start to make that happen. But it's not going to be with a supplement. It's not going to be with a smoothie. It's not going to be with 10 years of meditation. It's going to be with reform. And it's going to be listening to people that maybe you haven't listened to yet. And that's okay. They've been speaking. As Dax said on my podcast, he's been patient for 45 years now. He can wait a little longer, but you got to step forward. I hope these people do, really. I don't record these things. I'm not doing all this research and study and work and writing and interviews because I'm pessimistic that we can do the work. I'm not. I am optimistic, but some of you just got to be better. I can't express it any differently than that. And what I've seen this year happening around this community that I've spent 2 decades plus in now, you're falling back on your training. And I got to say, your training's not very impressive. It could get better, though. That's what you do when you train. You look for your weak spots, you get stronger. Find my weak spots. I'd love to make them stronger. That's what we're doing. We got to do it together, but you got to start. And this stuff that I'm looking at right now, sorry, it's got to stop. All right, I'll see you next time for Robert Whitaker, hopefully on Conspirituality. Peace.